She stumbled into the banquet hall bloodied, breathless, and completely out of place. Her black uniform clung to her like a soaked second skin, her eyes wide and wild. Every conversation at the Navy gala stopped mid-sentence. And then she looked directly at the man in white, the one with a chest full of medals, and whispered, "Please, hide me." Admiral Robert Warren stood at the head of a long mahogany table, surrounded by brass and power. And yet, he didn't call for security. He didn't demand answers. He just turned to the woman at his feet, nodded once, and said the 5 words that broke protocol and changed everything. "She's under my protection." Now, blood always smelled like copper and bleach. Vera knew this because she'd scrubbed enough of it off diner floors and, more recently, her own skin. Her husband made sure no mark stayed long. Bruises could be hidden beneath sleeves, but fear? Fear clung deeper. The rain outside pounded against the deck of the USS Halcyon, a retired warship now dressed up for Navy ceremony and PR optics. Every corridor was polished brass, every guard armed and silent. Vera had no clearance, no invitation. Just panic, a torn lip, and 30 seconds to lose the man who said she belonged to him. She hadn't meant to crash the event. She didn't even know what the ship was until she saw the bright lights and the security cordon. But when she saw the Admiral, the one she'd only read about in headlines, something desperate inside her lunged forward. The moment she crossed the threshold, the chatter froze like ice. Guests in crisp dress whites and sequined gowns stared, unsure if she was a threat, a stunt, or a ghost. Her steps echoed too loud. Her hands, smeared with blood, trembled as she moved forward. "Ma'am," a Marine guard warned. "This is a restricted event. Step aside." But she didn't stop. She didn't look back. She walked straight to the only man who looked like he could stop what was chasing her. Behind her, the double doors burst open. Eric Godwin, tall, clean-cut, wearing the smugness of a man who'd never been told no, stood in the doorway. His polished shoes hit the floor hard. His badge flashed. So did the fury in his eyes. "Vera," he barked. "You're embarrassing yourself. Come with me." Now, every head turned. Not toward him. Toward Admiral Warren. The Admiral set his cap down. His eyes were sharp. Cold. Then his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "If you so much as touch her again, you'll answer to the full authority of the United States Navy." Vera didn't understand naval politics. She didn't know about command codes or interagency rivalries. But she did know what it meant when a room full of admirals shifted nervously at one man's words. She also knew her husband well enough to see it, that twitch in his jaw, the flash of panic behind his fury. For the first time since this nightmare began, he wasn't in control. And for the first time in years, Vera wasn't alone. Hey, before we continue with the story, please like this video, subscribe, and share where you're watching from in the comments. Your encouragement helps us keep these stories coming. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic and secrets. Vera sat on the edge of the padded table, her knuckles bandaged, shoulders stiff from where Eric had slammed her into the kitchen counter that morning. A young medic named Liza worked in silence, occasionally shooting glances at Admiral Warren, who stood just inside the doorway, arms folded across his chest. The Admiral hadn't said a word since they'd left the banquet hall, but the room seemed to curve around his presence anyway. He wasn't looming, but the weight of his silence did it for him. "Cracked rib," Liza muttered, taping gauze gently around Vera's side. "Multiple contusions. Fresh and old." She didn't ask how they happened, and Vera didn't offer. Warren finally stepped forward, voice even. "When you're finished, I'll need 10 minutes with her. Alone." Liza nodded and packed up her supplies. "You'll need to come back for x-rays," she told Vera, then glanced toward Warren again. "She shouldn't be moved too much, sir." "Understood," he said, without looking away from Vera. The moment the door hissed shut behind the medic, he spoke again, this time lower. "Tell me everything. No omissions." Vera hesitated. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head, but now that it was real, her voice felt foreign in her throat. "His name is Eric Godwin," she began slowly. "He works for the Department of Defense." Or, I guess he advises them now. Doesn't matter, he's connected, and he knows how to make things disappear. She rubbed her hands over her knees, wincing when the gauze pulled. He wasn't always like this. At first, it was just controlling things, what I wore, who I saw, how long I stayed at work. Then it was yelling. Then slaps. Then worse. Warren didn't interrupt. He just listened, still as a statue. I filed a report 2 years ago after he dislocated my wrist. Her voice cracked, and she swallowed hard. I had pictures, medical records, everything. The base MP promised it would go through the proper channels. She looked up, eyes glassy. But nothing ever happened. It vanished. Warren's expression didn't change, but something sharp passed behind his eyes. He reached for a nearby tablet resting on the counter, tapping through screens with military precision. Godwin's file is locked under Tier 4 clearance. That's unusual. He turned the screen to face her. Did you know he has a level 9 security badge? Vera blinked. No. I didn't even know what that meant. It means he has access to black site logistics, defense contractor reports, and certain global intelligence archives. Warren's tone was flat. And it means someone is protecting him. A pause. You said you didn't mean to come here tonight. How did you end up on the ship? I ran. Vera folded her arms, instinctively curling inward. He lost his temper over a phone call. I think he knew I was trying to leave. I grabbed my bag and just kept moving. She glanced down. I saw the lights on the water. This ship was the only place that didn't look closed off. Warren set the tablet down and leaned against the wall, arms crossed again. You realize what you've done, don't you? Vera frowned. You didn't just interrupt a Navy gala. You invoked an action with legal, political, and international consequences. You're now under my protection. Which makes you a diplomatic situation. Her breath caught. I didn't mean to, I know, he cut in. But it doesn't change what's happening. Just then, his own comm device buzzed at his hip. He stepped to the side and tapped it once. Warren. The voice on the other end was clipped and cold. Admiral, this is Undersecretary Danvers. I've been instructed to inform you that the Department of Defense is requesting immediate custody of a civilian named Vera Anderson currently aboard your vessel. Warren's jaw tightened. On what grounds? National security risk, Danvers replied. She may be in possession of sensitive materials. Standing order. Turn her over within the hour. She's injured, Warren said evenly. She's under my protection pending further review. This isn't a request, Danvers replied, voice ice. It's an order. The line clicked dead before Warren could respond. Vera watched him pocket the comm device, his expression unreadable. They're scared, he murmured. They don't move this fast unless something's about to explode. He turned to her again. Did you take anything when you left? She shook her head. Just my bag. I didn't think, then she paused. Her eyes widened. Wait. There was a flash drive. I didn't pack it. It was just in my purse when I got here. She reached for the satchel slumped beside the exam table. Warren moved fast. Don't touch it, he warned, grabbing a sterile glove from the cabinet. He dug through the bag and pulled out a small black USB, wrapped loosely in a crumpled receipt. No markings. His eyes flicked to hers. Is this what they're afraid of? I don't even know what's on it, she whispered. Then we're going to find out, he said. They left the med bay and moved through the ship's narrow corridors, past uniformed staff who quickly looked away. Warren's quarters were on the upper level, tucked behind a secured hatch that required both a scan and voice clearance. Once inside, Vera paused, startled by the room's simplicity. No trophies. No framed awards. Just clean lines, polished oak, and a single photo of a younger Warren with a girl around 12. This is where you live, she asked quietly. Where I sleep, he corrected. Living happens elsewhere. He gestured to the center table. Sit. He pulled out a secure terminal from a wall panel, inserted the flash drive, and input a 22-character passphrase. The screen blinked. A folder popped up. Vera leaned forward, breath held. There were documents. Spreadsheets. A video file. One folder named Cleaners. Another titled Beckett. Her heart stopped. My father's name was Alan Beckett, she said. Warren didn't move. His face was still, but something in it fractured for just a second. Alan Beckett submitted an intelligence report in 2012, he said slowly. Claimed certain contracts with private firms were bypassing federal oversight. Weapons disappearing. Money changing hands in untraceable ways. She stared at him. And? It was discredited. Buried. His name was wiped from our systems after his death. Suicide, they called it. Warren paused. But I always wondered. He opened the Beckett folder. Dozens of PDFs blinked to life. One of them was a full transcript of the original report. Another was a threat assessment. The last file had a date, 1 week before Alan Beckett died. Vera read the subject line out loud. Clearance flag, targeted disposal suggested. She felt the room tilt beneath her. Warren stared at the screen. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked human. Not the man in the uniform. Not the shield of the institution. Just a man staring at the cost of silence. I saw this report, he said hoarsely. 10 years ago. I thought it was a stretch. Conspiracy talk. The committee dismissed it. She didn't say anything. I could have looked deeper, he added. But I didn't. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, he leaned forward, tapped a new tab, and pulled up a classified document labeled. Subject, Beckett, Allen, disavowed. Status, dismissed, unverifiable claims. File closed by Admiral Warren. Vera's breath caught. He had closed it. He had signed it away. I failed your father, he whispered. But I won't fail you. He stood, walked across the room, and pulled open a secured comm cabinet. Inside were 3 encrypted channels reserved for high-level internal affairs communication. He keyed in a call. This is Admiral Robert Warren. I need to speak with Director Calder immediately. Tell him it concerns the Beckett file and a witness the DoD is trying to erase. Vera sat back, the weight of it all settling in her chest like a stone. A man she barely knew had just appended a decade of silence. And a flash drive she didn't even know she had might be the only reason she was still alive. Warren ended the call and returned to the desk. He stared at the flash drive like it was a live weapon. Then he reached into a lower drawer and pulled out a sealed file, old and yellowed, stamped. Beckett, dismissed. He placed it on the desk, beside the still glowing screen, and sat there for a long time. The past had come back to haunt him. And this time, he wasn't going to bury it. The door to Admiral Warren's quarters hissed open with a sharp burst of hydraulics, and Commander Lena Ross stepped inside before being invited. Her expression was tight, her jaw clenched like a coiled spring, eyes flicking between Vera and the classified file still open on the console. Sir, she said, voice clipped. We need to talk. Now. Warren didn't move from his chair. Outside, Lena added, tone sharper than steel. Warren stood slowly, gesturing for Vera to remain seated, and led his executive officer into the adjacent briefing alcove. The door slid shut behind them with a heavy click, muffling but not silencing their voices. Vera sat motionless, her fingers twisting in her lap, mind still spiraling from the Beckett file. She could hear Lena's words, muffled but unmistakable in tone. You can't turn this ship into a sanctuary for civilians, not without consequences. Inside the alcove, Lena's arms were crossed, her entire posture a portrait of restrained defiance. Do you understand what you've done? She asked, keeping her voice low. This girl walked into our gala with no clearance, no escort, and no invitation. And instead of handing her to base command, you placed her under military protection. That's not protocol, it's mutiny by another name. Warren remained calm, though his eyes were unreadable. She's not just a waitress, he said. She's a witness. And potentially the daughter of a murdered whistleblower we buried. Lena hesitated, and something flickered across her face, doubt, perhaps, or memory. You're talking about Beckett, she said, quieter now. The file you closed 10 years ago. Warren nodded once. I just saw his report again. It was real. And if the flash drive she brought is what I think it is, we're standing on top of a live grenade. Lena exhaled hard and glanced back toward the sealed door behind them. How bad? Warren pulled a folder from his jacket and handed it to her. Bad enough to bury careers. Maybe burn down half the DoD. She flipped through the documents, her brow furrowing deeper with every page. And you're keeping her here? She's safer here than anywhere else, Warren said. For now. He closed the folder, his voice final. If Command wants her, they can come get her themselves. But I won't be the one handing her over. Back in the quarters, Vera was staring at the flash drive in Warren's terminal again. She hadn't touched it since earlier, but now something about it made her skin crawl. It looked ordinary, black plastic, silver tip, no markings, but somehow it felt radioactive. Like it wasn't just holding files, but danger. She stepped closer. A part of her didn't want to know what was inside. But another part, the part that had survived Eric, that had buried her father, that had scrubbed blood off tile floors, needed to see. She reached forward and hovered over the terminal's enter key. If you're going to open it, a new voice said from behind her, use something air-gapped. Startled, she turned. A young man in a lieutenant's uniform leaned casually against the doorframe, one brow arched. His face was sharp, angular, with dark eyes that seemed to measure everything they touched. Name's Cruz. Lieutenant Mark Cruz. Cyber Intelligence. Vera blinked. Warren sent for you? He doesn't trust anyone else with it, Cruz replied, stepping inside and setting a small briefcase down on the table. If this thing holds what he thinks it does, plugging it into any connected system would be like dropping a match in a powder keg. He pulled out a small black laptop, military issue, no wireless card, and began powering it on. Mind if I take a look? Vera shook her head and handed him the flash drive. Cruz handled it like evidence, sliding it into the port and typing quickly. The screen filled with code and static as he launched a decryption program. Multiple layers, he muttered. Encrypted 3 times. Whoever made this didn't want anyone getting in unless they had a specific key. He paused. And lucky for us, your husband isn't as clever as he thinks. Vera hovered behind him, heart pounding. The progress bar crawled forward in tense silence. Then suddenly, the screen flashed and opened a main directory. There were 4 folders. One labeled Cargo Logs, another Eagle Nest, a third titled Cleaners, and the last one, Beckett. Cruz clicked into Cargo Logs first, revealing spreadsheets of shipments with coded destinations, seemingly benign until matched with coordinates from restricted zones. These weapons are going to unauthorized locations, Cruz murmured. Africa. Middle East. And none of it's logged through NATO. He opened Eagle Nest, next, maps of black sites, internal memos between contractors, and emails using burner aliases. Your husband, Cruz said, has been laundering military-grade arms to non-state actors. This could bring down half the contractors in D.C. Then he clicked Cleaners. Vera's stomach turned. There were photos, names, surveillance logs, targets. One folder labeled, Priority Removal Candidates. Inside was her father's name, Alan Beckett. Next to it, status, eliminated. Cause of death, suicidal fall. No investigation requested. She stumbled back, hand over her mouth. Cruz looked up, face grim. I'm sorry, he said quietly. They had him watched for months. It was an operation, not an accident. Vera didn't respond. Her vision swam. Warren returned a few minutes later, Lena behind him. One look at Vera's face and he knew. You found something. Cruz nodded. It's worse than we thought. He handed Warren a flash drive copy and summary report. This isn't just corruption. It's conspiracy. Full scale. Before anyone could say another word, Warren's comm buzzed sharply. He answered immediately. Go. A young communications officer spoke fast. Sir, you need to see this. It's on the news. What is? The woman. Vera Anderson. She's trending globally. Warren snapped on the nearby terminal and opened the secure media feed. There it was, a still frame from the gala, Vera on her knees, hands bloodied, looking up at Admiral Warren as officers stood frozen around them. The headline screamed, Who is she? Bloodied civilian crashes Navy gala, protected by Admiral Warren. Below it, speculation churned like wildfire. Was she a victim? A terrorist? A lover? And why had Warren broken protocol for her? Lena swore under her breath. This just became a public relations nightmare. The Navy won't sit still on this, Cruz added. They'll release a blanket statement, maybe call it a security drill, or claim she's a family friend. Warren stared at the image. No. They'll try to spin it, but they'll also try to erase her before anyone asks too many questions. Vera turned away from the screen, the walls closing in. I didn't mean to start all this, she whispered. I just wanted someone to believe me. Warren moved beside her. You didn't start this, he said. They did. You just lit the match. Outside the room, alarms sounded twice, just enough to be noticed, not enough to panic. A warning, not an alert. But Warren's expression darkened. They're testing reactions, he muttered. Seeing who moves first. He looked at Cruz. Get this to internal affairs on an isolated line. Then to Lena, double security around her room. No communications. No visitors without clearance. Finally, he turned to Vera. Whatever you thought this was, he said, voice low and firm, it's bigger. We're not just protecting you anymore. We're protecting a truth people have tried to bury for a decade. Vera nodded, but her eyes were still fixed on the screen on that photo, on that moment frozen in time. A moment that had already changed everything. What would you do if one piece of evidence in your purse held the power to bring down a government? Let us know in the comments, and if you're hooked by Vera's fight for truth, make sure to subscribe for the next explosive part of the story. The walls of the Pentagon's Situation Room were lined with flat panel monitors and shadowed by men whose names rarely appeared in headlines. Senator James Rayburn, a silver-haired fixture of defense subcommittees, leaned back in his leather chair, eyes fixed on the image displayed at the center of the screen. Vera Anderson, bloodied, kneeling before Admiral Warren aboard the USS Halcyon. This is already out of control, he muttered. We can't afford a media firestorm when our Eastern contracts are barely holding together. Beside him, two retired admirals, Kestrel and Malloy, shared a tense glance. Warren's protecting her for a reason, Admiral Malloy said. That's not protocol. That's a message. Kestrel grunted. The only message I see is that our most trusted officer went rogue in front of the international press. Rayburn gestured to an aide, who handed him a folder. According to this, he said, flipping through pages, the girl is linked to Alan Beckett. She's his daughter. And the flash drive she's carrying just triggered 5 tripwires in 4 departments. The room shifted. Every pair of eyes sharpened. Beckett's been dead for over a decade, Kestrel said. And that report was buried for good reason. Clearly not buried deep enough, Rayburn replied. And now, thanks to Vera Anderson and Warren Stunt, we've got a spotlight over every inch of our shadow budget. His hand flattened on the table. We contain this. Now. He turned to the assistant near the comms panel. Issue a directive to Marine Command on Halcyon. Civilian target, Vera Anderson. Detain on site. Use force if necessary. The aide hesitated. Sir, protocol, I'm not asking, Rayburn snapped. We've got 5 days before this ends up in front of a Senate ethics panel. If she's still breathing by then, we all go down. Half a world away, Admiral Warren watched the sun rise over the ship's starboard bow, the waters beneath it calm and quiet. But inside, tension gripped the Halcyon like a coiled serpent. He stood on the bridge, shoulders square, arms behind his back. Commander Lena Ross approached, tablet in hand. Orders just came through from command, she said. MP detachment en route. Escalated civilian containment. Warren's brow furrowed. How escalated? Lena handed over the tablet. They've authorized force. They're treating her like a rogue element. He didn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was low. They've declared war on a civilian. Below deck, Vera sat in the secure briefing room beside Lieutenant Cruz, whose fingers flew across a keyboard, transferring encrypted files from the drive to a protected server. That senator from the news, Rayburn, he's in this too, Cruz muttered. Emails, payouts, travel logs. He's neck deep. Vera watched the screen without blinking. Of course he is, she said. They all are. She looked away, her voice lower now. Do you want to know the worst part? Cruz paused, glancing at her. I knew. I knew what Eric did to my dad. She pulled her knees up to her chest, voice cracking. I just couldn't prove it until now. Cruz leaned back in his chair, eyes softening. Tell me what happened. Vera's hands curled tightly. My father worked for the Inspector General's office. He found a paper trail connecting arms contractors to unauthorized military shipments. When he brought it forward, he was threatened. First subtly, then directly. She took a shaky breath. Eric was just starting his career. I didn't know he was involved. But one night, I heard him talking on the phone. He said it was taken care of. That the problem was off the board. She swallowed. The next day, my father fell from a parking garage. They called it suicide. Cruz's knuckles turned white on the keyboard. Jesus. Vera nodded, eyes glazed. I lived in that silence for 10 years. Until last week, when Eric came home drunk and told me everything. Said he regretted nothing. Said my father made the mistake of thinking he mattered. In Warren's office, the Admiral pulled up the ship's secure network logs. He scrolled through message records, transmission timestamps, and restricted access pings. Something didn't add up. A secure packet had been sent out 1 hour after Vera arrived on board, tagged as standard diagnostics, but routed through an outdated node near engineering. Someone had leaked her presence. Warren narrowed his eyes. Lena, he called, and she entered within seconds. I want a full review of all outgoing comms for the last 48 hours. Priority level encryption tags only. Flag anything rerouted or masked. Lena hesitated. You think we have a leak? We don't have a leak, Warren said coldly. We have a mole. As Cruz cross-referenced the files with the Navy's internal systems, a ping echoed across his laptop. Got something, he said. Surveillance footage from yesterday. Someone sent a package to Rear Admiral Ford when he boarded. Vera blinked. Who's Ford? Temporary liaison from Central Command, Cruz said. He's supposed to be retired. But he's here now, and getting deliveries from crewmen who aren't even on today's shift. He tapped the footage open. A grainy black and white video played, showing a uniformed crewman approaching Rear Admiral Ford and handing over a slim case, barely the size of a tablet. Vera leaned in. Pause it. Cruz froze the frame. The crewman had his back to the camera, but his gait was familiar. Too familiar. That's him, Vera said. That's Eric's contact. He came to our house once. I thought he was a family friend. Cruz checked the crew manifest. Name's Devin Pike. Electronics Division. Lower decks. He leaned back, whistling low. He's our fox. Meanwhile, in the officer's galley, Pike sat alone, sipping bad coffee and reading from a tablet he'd already wiped twice. The message on the screen was short, get her to the deck. Rear Admiral will handle the rest. He checked the time. He had 4 hours. Just enough to make his move before the MPs arrived to clean up. He stood, left his tray, and headed for the lower corridors. But he didn't realize Cruz had already triggered facial recognition. Warren received the ping at 0903. Found him, he said. Get a detail. Quietly. Lena was already moving. We'll bring him in without alerting the others. Cruz turned back to Vera. You're not safe here anymore, he said. Not with command trying to drag you off the ship and rats like Pike crawling around. Vera straightened. Then let's finish what we started. Whatever's on that drive, we expose it. We burn it into daylight. Warren stepped into the room, eyes hard. Then we move fast, he said. Because the fox isn't alone. And if they think we're onto them, they won't wait for permission. Later that night, Pike was escorted under pretense to a secure comms room. But Warren was waiting. Alongside him stood Lena, Cruz, and 2 armed guards. Pike froze. Admiral. Warren's voice was ice. Do you know what betrayal tastes like, petty officer? Pike opened his mouth to lie, but Warren slammed the surveillance photo down onto the table. This is you, Warren said. Handing classified contents to a rear admiral during an active investigation. He leaned in. Do you want to tell me who you're working for? Or should I ask internal affairs to drag it out of you? Pike said nothing. But the sweat on his brow said plenty. The klaxon sounded at 7:41, one long, echoing wail that made the ship's bulkheads hum like a warning growl. Red lights bathed the corridors in pulsing urgency, and all non-essential personnel were ordered to quarters. "This is not a drill," the overhead speakers repeated every 30 seconds. "USS Halcyon is now under emergency lockdown. All external communications are suspended." Admiral Robert Warren stood on the operations deck, hands clasped tightly behind his back as the control board turned crimson. Commander Lena Ross stepped beside him, helmet under her arm, jaw clenched. "They activated Protocol 9, she said. "Full lockdown authority." Warren didn't blink. "Means they're coming for her." Outside the ship, a convoy of Marine MPs arrived at the naval base checkpoint, led by a black, unmarked van flanked by Humvees. The lead officer handed over a clearance card marked Emergency Security Operations. The guards didn't question it. They'd already been briefed, understood the choreography of containment. But inside the command center, Cruz was already watching the convoy approach on drone feeds. "They're not here to negotiate," Cruz muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. "They're rolling in like it's a combat op." Vera stood beside him, dressed in fatigues, her hair pulled back, the bruises on her face mostly faded but still visible. "They're going to try and take me?" she asked. "They're going to do a lot more than that," Cruz replied. "Unless we move now." Warren appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 security officers. "We're transferring you," he said, voice clipped. "Somewhere they won't look first." Vera hesitated. "Where?" "Old Torpedo Bay," Warren replied. "We decommissioned it 5 years ago. Cameras haven't worked since." She nodded, jaw set. "Let's go." The escort moved quickly through dim, lower-deck corridors rarely used by crew. Echoes from boof falls bounced off steel walls, the occasional hiss of pressurized doors opening and sealing again. The torpedo bay had been repurposed for storage, filled with crates of outdated gear, oxygen canisters, and rusting metal fixtures. In the far corner, behind a wall of stacked cases, was a narrow space outfitted with a cot, a portable terminal, and a backup power unit. "It's not luxury," Warren said, "but it's safe." As they secured the entrance, Cruz sat at the side terminal, the decrypted flash drive loaded in front of him. "I've cracked more of it," he said. "It's worse than we thought." Vera leaned closer. "Show me." The screen lit up with a spreadsheet of coded accounts, shell companies, and bank transfers, amounts that made her stomach turn. "Eric's been selling weapons for years," Cruz said. "Mortars, rifles, surveillance tech, stuff marked as missing in transit." But it didn't just vanish. It was redirected. He clicked another tab, revealing flagged transactions routed to nodes in Eastern Europe and Northern Africa. "These recipients," he said, pointing to the screen, "aren't recognized governments. They're paramilitary groups, militia leaders, Black Flag warlords. Some of them are on Interpol's terror watch list." Vera stared at the screen, numb. "And the Senate?" she asked. "Watch this," Cruz said grimly. He played a short clip, grainy security footage inside a defense contractor's boardroom. A man in a suit, face blurred but voice unaltered, leaned across the table. "Senator Rayburn's office approves the diversion. Tell Eric it's greenlit." Vera recoiled. "That's his voice," she said. "I've heard him talk to Eric on speaker." Cruz looked up. "They used your husband to bypass federal oversight. Moved weapons through black channels. Killed your father when he tried to speak up. And now they're trying to erase you before this all goes public." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat down, exhaling slowly, as if releasing the last of whatever illusion she had left about justice. "How much do they know?" she asked. "Enough to send half a tactical unit after you," Cruz replied. "Enough to rewrite the narrative before it reaches a single reporter." Above deck, the MPs were granted limited access to the ship. "We're conducting an emergency clearance sweep," their commander told Lena, who blocked them at the hangar bay checkpoint. "Chain of command's been activated." "My crew is secure," Lena replied coolly. "You're not sweeping anything unless Admiral Warren says otherwise." The commander lifted a clipboard. This came from the top. Warren appeared at that moment, stepping onto the hangar floor in full uniform, expression unreadable. "The Halcyon remains under my authority," he said. You're not to touch a civilian under my protection without a direct order from the Joint Chiefs. The lead MP hesitated. Sir, with respect, your respect is noted, Warren cut in. So is your presence. Now get off my ship unless you're here to cooperate. Tension crackled in the air, but eventually the MPs backed off, retreating to their vehicles. Warren turned to Lena. We bought time. How much? Not enough, he muttered. Back in the torpedo bay, crews continued decrypting. Each file peeled back another layer of corruption, greed, and hidden hands. They're not just laundering money, he said. They're laundering wars. Vera stared at a manifest dated 3 months ago, 50 crates of unmarked rifles routed through Djibouti. These guns ended up in child soldier camps, Cruz added. We traced one of them to a massacre in Mali. Same serial batch. Vera covered her mouth. And Eric knew? Cruz nodded. Not just knew. Coordinated. He clicked a final tab. And here's the worst part. The folder was labeled, Obstacles, Active Threats. Inside were photos. Surveillance stills. A time-stamped log. The last entry. Subject, V. Anderson. Status, known liability. Surveillance breached. Removal under consideration. Vera blinked. They had me on a list? They have you, Cruz corrected. And they've already marked you for deletion. Warren entered moments later, face set like stone. You need to hear this, Cruz said, gesturing to the screen. Warren read silently, eyes narrowing as each new line lit up. Then he exhaled. If this drive gets out, he said, half of DC burns. If you uncovered undeniable proof that your government was funding war crimes, would you expose it, even if it meant becoming a target? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you're following Vera's fight for truth, subscribe so you don't miss the next part of the story. The fallout is just beginning. The room was dimly lit, sealed from surveillance, and lined with thick soundproofing foam. Admiral Warren stood at the head of a folding table, arms crossed, eyes scanning a crude map of the naval base projected on the wall. We have one shot, he said. Anything goes wrong, she ends up in a black site or a coffin. Around the table sat Commander Lena Ross, Lieutenant Cruz, and an older man in civilian clothes with a weathered face and unreadable eyes. Name's Chandler, the man said, voice gravel rough. Former CIA, now officially nobody. He tapped a spot on the map, an inlet off the southern pier. Federal marshals will meet us here. Off the books, no manifest, no paper trail. Lena leaned in. And the MPs? We'll have their eyes glued to the northern gate, Chandler said. If we time it right. Warren folded his arms tighter. They've got surveillance on the piers, spotters on towers, and drones in rotation every 6 minutes. We'll need a diversion. Something big enough to draw their attention, but quiet enough to not trigger a full alarm. Cruz looked up from his tablet. What about a fake medevac? We fake a personnel burn. Call it a breach in the battery room. Lena nodded. The southern exit has an old maintenance tunnel, can route her out that way. But we'll need a medical crew to sell the part. Warren looked at Cruz. Can you spoof the med logs? Cruz smiled faintly. Already working on it. Warren turned to Vera. You okay playing wounded? Vera gave a grim smile. I've been playing wounded for 3 years, she said. Might as well do it for something that matters. Chandler gave a slow nod of approval. You've got steel in you, kid. She glanced at the burn kit laid out on the table. Let's hope it holds. The prep took hours. Cruz assembled a burner tablet with medical records, complete with faked imaging scans showing second-degree thermal injuries to Vera's upper torso. Lena stitched together a report with just enough Navy jargon to bypass space scrutiny. Meanwhile, Chandler coordinated with the marshals via a secure line buried under 6 layers of proxy routing. The ship's old battery room was rigged with a minor smoke emitter and fake heat sensors. Warren stood in the center of it all, the calm inside the chaos. By dusk, everything was in motion. Vera had been dressed in standard fatigues, her face partially obscured by gauze, arms wrapped with bandages dusted in fake blood and burn gel. You look awful, Cruz said with a half-smile. Perfect. Vera didn't laugh. Her nerves were strung tight, heart pounding loud enough to feel in her teeth. Let's move, she said. Two medtechs, real crewmen briefed and loyal, escorted her on a stretcher through the lower deck corridor. Warren followed, dressed in medical garb, clipboard in hand, barking orders like he'd done this 1,000 times. Thermal failure in Battery 2, he snapped to a passing guard. Civilian observer caught in the blast. Orders are to evac her to triage pier side for handoff to Level 4 trauma. The guard nodded, buying the urgency. They reached the hatch leading to the access tunnel, an old maintenance passage that hadn't seen use since the Cold War. Chandler waited at the mouth, glancing at his watch. Marshals are 5 minutes out. Lena keyed open the gate. Get her moving. I'll trigger the smoke alarm topside. That should draw attention. The team moved fast. Vera was wheeled into the tunnel, her stretcher bumping against rusted steel and low-hanging pipes. This is really happening, she whispered. Cruz walked beside her. You're almost free. Vera swallowed. Almost never seems close enough. Above them, Lena tapped the trigger for the smoke emitter. Instantly, the Battery 2 alarm blared across the ship, red lights pulsing in rhythm with a shrill mechanical scream. The bridge lit up in response, comms officers barking into radios, MPs redirecting toward the northern quadrant. All units, a voice crackled. Evac underway. Civilian casualty. Cameras swiveled. Drones rerouted. It should have worked. And for a moment, it did. But in the security office on Deck 2, Devon Pike, the crewman they'd caught earlier, sat chained to a chair until someone cut him loose. The mole. The one no one had accounted for. And as soon as he slipped free, he sent a single message through a ghost terminal embedded in the ship's legacy system. Extraction in progress. South access. The alert reached the MPs before Warren's team reached the pier. Halfway down the maintenance tunnel, the radios on their hips crackled with frantic voices. Unauthorized movement detected near south exit. Repeat, south pier breach. Cruz cursed. They know. Chandler drew a sidearm. We push through. The tunnel opened into a narrow maintenance dock beside the main pier. Ahead, the dark silhouette of a civilian boat waited in the water, unmarked, quiet, engine humming low. A marshal stepped out from behind the wheelhouse. Hurry, he called. They've already mobilized ground units. Warren waved the team forward. Go now. Vera stood from the stretcher, limping forward under her own power, holding the side of her ribs to keep up the burn charade. Cruz covered her left. Chandler took the right. Then a voice shouted from the far end of the dock. Freeze! Floodlights exploded overhead. MP trucks screeched into view, soldiers leaping out with weapons drawn. Vera turned, eyes wide, as a dozen laser sights lit the darkness. Drop your weapons, one shouted. Turn the civilian over, now. Warren stepped forward, raising his hands, voice steady. This woman is a protected witness. You're out of jurisdiction. The lead MP shouted back. We have direct orders. From who? You know who. It all happened at once. A twitch. A mistake. A young MP, nervous, edged forward too fast. Someone shouted. A shot rang out. Vera gasped. The impact slammed her backward, blood spraying across her shoulder as she dropped hard to the pier floor. Vera! Cruz screamed, diving to her side. More shouting. Weapons raised. Chaos on both ends of the standoff. Chandler fired once, high and away, just to stall. We're losing the window, he roared. Warren dropped to one knee beside Vera. Blood soaked through the gauze, real now, not fake. Her eyes fluttered, breath ragged. I'm fine, she lied. You're not, he snapped, tearing the gauze from her fake burns to press over the real wound. More MPs moved in. The federal marshal fired a warning shot into the air. Stand down or you will be charged with unlawful military aggression, he yelled. The MP commander hesitated. Warren scooped Vera into his arms and ran for the boat. Cruz and Chandler covered the retreat, ducking low as the bullets stopped just short of lethal. The marshals pulled Vera aboard. We're pulling out. Chandler leapt aboard last. Warren stood at the rail, eyes locked on the MPs still gathered on the pier. No one fired again. The boat peeled away into the blackness of the water. Vera lay crumpled on the floor, her fatigue soaked red. Cruz knelt beside her, hands pressed over her wound. "Stay with us," he whispered. "You made it. You're out." But Vera's eyes had closed, and no one knew if she could still hear them. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the safe house. Vera stirred, groggy and disoriented, her shoulder wrapped tightly and her mouth dry. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting the room in soft gold, but her body felt like it had been dragged through war. She tried to sit up and winced, pain blooming across her side like a warning flare. A woman in a U.S. Marshal's badge stepped into view, holding a bottle of water. "Easy," she said. "You're safe now." The safe house was small, tucked deep in a wooded area outside Norfolk, with blackout shutters and bulletproof windows. 2 agents were posted at every exit, both armed, both discreetly professional. Vera was given clean clothes, antibiotics, and instructions to rest. No visitors. No phone calls. No contact with the outside world until the marshals finished securing the next stage of her extraction. She lay on the narrow bed, blinking at the cracked ceiling above her, trying to process what had happened. The extraction. The gunshot. The sound of her own screams swallowed by water. Her shoulder throbbed with each breath, a harsh reminder that not all wounds stayed hidden beneath skin. But even worse than the pain was the silence. No one had told her if Warren made it out. That afternoon, one of the agents handed her a remote and turned on the television. The headline scrolled across the bottom in bold red. "Navy whistleblower or delusional accuser. Civilian story faces scrutiny." Vera stared in disbelief as a news anchor stood outside the Pentagon gates, microphone in hand. Sources inside Naval Command say the woman involved in the Halcyon incident is mentally unstable and may have been manipulated by Admiral Robert Warren, who is now facing internal inquiry. Warren has refused comment, but insiders suggest he broke military protocol for personal reasons, possibly emotional entanglement or misjudgment. The screen cut to B-roll of her at the gala, bloodied, shaking, kneeling beside Warren. Her image frozen in time, twisted into propaganda. The next segment featured a blurred photo of Eric Godwin. Her estranged husband, the anchor continued, a Department of Defense contractor, has denied all allegations and stated that he believes Admiral Warren is using his wife to damage national security interests. Vera laughed, short, bitter, and hollow. "Of course he did," she muttered. "He always finds the stage." The agent beside her cleared his throat. "Don't take it too personally," he said. "That's not for you. That's for the public. They're building a narrative before this thing goes nuclear." Vera nodded slowly. "I'm not crazy," she whispered. "I know what I saw. What they did to my father." The hours passed in slow, aching silence. Vera drifted in and out of sleep, the painkillers pulling her into restless dreams. She saw Eric's face in shadows. Her father's voice on a recording she couldn't replay. Blood dripping onto marble floors. Gunfire echoing from piers. But when she woke again, just past midnight, there was a knock at the door. A marshal opened it cautiously. "You have a visitor," he said. "He's cleared. Alone. I'll be right outside." Vera sat up, bracing herself. Then the figure stepped through, and her breath caught. Admiral Warren. He looked older than before. Not in body, but in soul. His uniform jacket was gone, sleeves rolled to the elbows, a bandage on one hand and shadows under his eyes. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before finally saying, "You made it." Vera blinked hard. "So did you." He crossed the room and sat in the chair beside her bed, shoulders stiff. "Your extraction was messy," he said quietly. "They're using it against us now. MPs filed a report accusing me of obstruction and unlawful use of force. I've been temporarily relieved of command pending inquiry." Vera frowned. "They're going to court-martial you?" "Probably," he said. "I broke protocol. I defied direct orders. And I protected someone the Pentagon labeled a liability." He looked her in the eye. "I'd do it again." They sat in silence for a while, the air heavy with everything they couldn't say out loud. Warren rubbed a hand over his face, then exhaled hard. "When your father filed that report 10 years ago," he began, "it came across my desk. Vera's heart skipped. I remember reading it. Half the department laughed it off, said it sounded like a conspiracy theory. I didn't push back. I didn't open an investigation. I signed the dismissal and moved on. Vera said nothing. She didn't have to. I told myself I was protecting the integrity of the command, he continued. That it wasn't my place. That maybe he was wrong. He shook his head. But he wasn't. And I knew it. Warren looked down at his hands, strong hands, calloused from decades of service, now shaking. You came to me begging for help, he said, voice tight. And I saw your father's eyes. I saw the same defiance. The same fear. And I knew I'd failed him. I wasn't going to fail you too. Vera's throat burned. He died thinking no one listened, she whispered. I know, Warren replied. And that's on me. The room was still. No orders. No uniforms. No witnesses. Just two people, bound by the weight of their choices and the ghosts of the ones they'd lost. Vera reached out, resting her hand lightly over his. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. Just understanding. Thank you, she said. For listening. For believing me when no one else would. Warren nodded once, slowly. They'll come after us harder now, he said. Media, politics, maybe worse. But we have the truth. And we're not alone. He stood, straightening his shoulders. Get some rest. I'll be nearby. The marshals will keep you safe while I work on the next step. What's that? She asked. He turned to the door, his profile carved in shadows. Turning everything they buried into something they can't ignore. The rotunda of the Congressional Oversight Chamber had never felt more like a theater. Rows of cameras lined the back wall, their blinking red lights fixed on the central table where microphones waited like loaded weapons. Politicians shifted in their leather chairs, aides whispered behind clipboards, and a small army of reporters waited, pens poised, eyes sharp. The hearing was live-streamed to every major network in the country. At the center of it all, under the glow of spotlights and scrutiny, sat Admiral Robert Warren. He wore his full uniform, medals aligned, back ramrod straight. But there was something in his expression, something stripped of political polish. He wasn't here to protect rank or reputation. He was here to deliver a reckoning. And no amount of spin could dilute what he had to say. On the opposite side of the chamber sat Eric Godwin, in a custom Navy suit with a smirk painted across his face. He looked relaxed, hands folded, flanked by two high-priced attorneys who exuded quiet menace. Cameras loved him, the wounded husband, the government contractor accused by a fragile wife, and a defiant admiral. He nodded faintly when Warren entered, the kind of nod that said, "You can't touch me." But Warren didn't look back. Senator Rayburn cleared his throat and addressed the room. This hearing is now in session. We are gathered to assess potential breaches of protocol, misuse of military authority, and the actions taken by Admiral Robert Warren regarding the protection of civilian Vera Anderson. He looked over his glasses. Admiral, the floor is yours. Warren stepped forward and placed a sealed folder on the table. He adjusted the microphone. Before I answer questions, he said, voice firm, I'd like to read from a report filed 10 years ago by Inspector General Analyst Alan Beckett. There was a pause. A few senators exchanged confused glances. That report, Warren continued, was discredited, buried, and ultimately dismissed on my recommendation. He opened the folder and began to read. The following evidence suggests collusion between select Department of Defense contractors and foreign paramilitary groups. Several shipments marked as lost in transit have reappeared in conflict zones across Eastern Europe and Northern Africa. Financial trails have been scrubbed via shell companies routed through legislative allies. Warren looked up. The man who wrote this died under suspicious circumstances. His name was Alan Beckett. His daughter came to me bruised, hunted, and carrying a flash drive she didn't know she had. Inside that drive was proof that her father was telling the truth. He clicked a button on the desk console. Screens flickered to life behind him, displays filled with decrypted files, shipping manifests, encrypted communications, and photos of weapons caches. This, Warren said, turning slightly, is a list of every weapons contract redirected through non-sanctioned routes in the last 7 years. Many of these shipments were tagged for use by U.S. forces, but instead, they ended up in the hands of warlords, militia leaders, and extremists. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed in. Senators leaned forward. Warren pressed again. This, he continued, is a list of names. Contractors, administrators, and elected officials who authorized or benefited from these transactions. You'll find emails from Senator Rayburn's chief of staff, memos signed by retired Admirals Kestrel and Malloy, and financial statements tying those profits back to government accounts labeled as infrastructure grants. Rayburn sat stiff in his seat, face pale. His aide whispered furiously into his ear. Warren looked directly at the panel. The question you should be asking today isn't how Vera Anderson ended up under my protection. The question is, how many like her were ignored? How many whistleblowers were silenced? How many lives were deemed collateral for profit and convenience? Silence gripped the chamber. Then Rayburn leaned forward. Admiral Warren, are you suggesting a conspiracy embedded within the Department of Defense? I'm not suggesting, Warren replied calmly. I'm confirming. Chairs scraped. Reporters clicked furiously. The entire country was watching. Warren stepped back. I am prepared to accept the consequences of my defiance. But I will not apologize for doing what should have been done a decade ago. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Thank you, Admiral. We will now hear testimony from Ms. Vera Anderson. The room shifted again as Vera entered from a side door, walking slowly, shoulders still stiff beneath her modest blazer. She looked smaller than the moment deserved, but there was something in her eyes, calm, focused, and unafraid. She sat, adjusted the microphone, and took a breath that seemed to center the entire room. Then she began to speak. My name is Vera Anderson, she said. I'm the daughter of Alan Beckett. I'm also the wife, soon to be former, of Eric Godwin. She didn't look in his direction. 3 weeks ago, I was a waitress with a bruised arm and a broken silence. Now I'm here because someone finally listened. She described the years of control, the gaslighting, the night she found the flash drive, and the night Eric admitted that her father was dealt with. Her voice trembled at times, but it never broke. He told me no one would believe me, she said. That men like him had friends who'd erase my name before I could finish a sentence. Vera looked at the panel. For a long time, I thought he was right. She glanced at Warren, who gave a barely perceptible nod. But Admiral Warren didn't erase me. He believed me. He protected me when no one else would. She reached into her pocket and unfolded a photo, a small, weathered image of her father in uniform. She held it up. This man tried to tell the truth. He died because of it. I don't know if justice still means anything in this building. But if it does, it starts by listening to the people no one wants to hear. The room fell into silence. A long, reverent silence. Vera sat back in her chair, eyes wet but steady. They tried to silence me, she said softly. But Admiral Warren listened. And that changed everything. If the truth threatened everything you thought was stable, would you still stand up and speak it? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe stories like Vera's deserve to be heard, subscribe now, the reckoning isn't over yet. The arrest happened at 6:42 a.m. in a quiet suburb outside D.C., just as Eric Godwin stepped out of his home in a fresh suit and coffee in hand. Federal agents swarmed like shadows, pinning him to the pavement before he had time to blink. He shouted about entrapment, about classified immunity, about how none of this would stick. But no one listened this time. The handcuffs clicked with finality, and the cameras were already rolling. By noon, the charges were read: conspiracy, treason, obstruction of justice, unlawful arms distribution, and the murder of Alan Beckett. The indictment was unsealed live on national television, and a stunned nation watched the man who once smiled beside senators be led through the courthouse in chains. His lawyers offered no comment. His former allies began deleting old photos, old posts, old connections. But the storm had already broken. Within 48 hours, Senator Rayburn and Admiral Malloy both tendered their resignations, citing personal health and family priorities. The public didn't buy it. Leaked documents traced wire transfers, covert meetings, and cover-ups stretching back nearly a decade. Calls for further investigation spread like wildfire, and congressional hearings began drafting new oversight protocols before the ink on the indictments had dried. Overnight, Vera Anderson's name became synonymous with justice that didn't come easily, but came anyway. Admiral Robert Warren stood at the press podium in full uniform, the same stoic posture he'd worn during battle briefings and state ceremonies. Reporters filled the room, live feeds streaming across networks and military circles alike. He adjusted the microphone once, looked directly into the camera, and said the words no one expected. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as Admiral of the USS Halcyon and from active duty service in the United States Navy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He continued without flinching. This is not an admission of failure. This is a choice. A declaration that no uniform, no rank, no medal should be used to cover silence in the face of injustice. He paused. My oath was to serve, not to stand by. And I have fulfilled it, just not in the way the system wanted me to. The room remained quiet as he stepped down. No applause. No questions. Just the slow shutter click of cameras and the collective exhale of a nation relearning what integrity looked like. That image of a decorated man walking away from power, not in disgrace, but with clarity, would go viral before midnight. And in the days that followed, young officers would replay that moment as both a challenge and a compass. Vera didn't attend the press conference. She watched it from a secure room inside a federal building, her arms still in a sling, her expression unreadable. The marshals had offered her a chance to disappear, new identity, new city, no more whispers or headlines or risk. She could take it. Start over. Leave the ghosts behind. But ghosts don't always let go just because the system finally does. Instead of accepting a plane ticket and forged papers, Vera asked for a car and 1 hour of privacy. The marshals hesitated, but Warren's signature on the request sealed it. That morning, she drove to a quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Annapolis, where the grass grew tall and most of the graves went unvisited. She found her father's name etched in fading stone, weathered by time and abandonment. Alan Beckett, 1959 to 2012. For a long time, she said nothing. She sat in the grass beside the headstone, fingers trailing over the chiseled letters, the silence pressing against her chest. They called you paranoid, she whispered. Said you were chasing shadows. Said you lost your mind. She smiled faintly. But you were right. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside were 2 medals, a Navy Distinguished Service Medal and a folded slip of paper signed by Admiral Warren. The medal had once been awarded to her father, then stripped posthumously when his credibility collapsed under fabricated charges. Now, decades later, it had been restored. Vera pressed it gently against the stone. They gave this back, she said, her voice soft. You didn't lose your honor. They just buried it. Her hand trembled slightly. I thought I was too late, Dad. But you taught me the truth doesn't expire. It just waits. The breeze rustled through the trees as if offering a reply. She closed the box, set it at the base of the headstone, and sat with him a little longer. No cameras. No politics. Just daughter and father, finally heard. Back at the safe house, the marshals greeted her with quiet nods. A new file sat on the table, her new life, her clean slate. She glanced at it but didn't reach for it. Not yet. There were still decisions to make. That night, Warren called. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't talk about headlines or charges or future plans. He just said he would have been proud of you. Vera closed her eyes. I hope so. He knew the truth, Warren added. You made sure the world knew it too. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't need to. Sometimes silence said everything. The cafe was quiet that morning, warm light spilling through fogged windows, the clink of spoons against porcelain, the faint hum of music drifting through overhead speakers. Vera sat near the back, a half-finished croissant on her plate, her fingers curled around a mug of black coffee. The name on her driver's license now read Eleanor Vance, and her hair was a shade darker than before. But some truths couldn't be hidden with dye and forged papers. You could change your name, change your city, even change the rhythm of your voice, but not who you were when it mattered most. She liked this place. Quiet. Anonymity was its own kind of safety, and here no one looked twice when she entered. The woman who had once knelt before an admiral, bleeding and desperate, now walked unnoticed among commuters and college students. She rented a small apartment above a used bookstore. She paid in cash. She kept to herself. The world had moved on, or at least it looked like it had. The hearings had ended. The headlines had faded. Eric Godwin sat in a federal prison awaiting sentencing, his appeals already denied by multiple courts. 2 more resignations followed Rayburn's, and a special commission had been formed to audit foreign weapons contracts dating back 15 years. It was change, slow, overdue, but real. And still, Vera lived quietly. She didn't give interviews. She turned down book deals. A documentary team had tried to track her down twice. She ghosted them both. Fame had never been the goal. Survival had been. And after that, healing. She glanced up as the door chimed softly and a college-age woman entered, cheeks flushed from the cold, hair swept back beneath a navy blue scarf. The woman approached the counter, ordered something warm, then turned, eyes locking briefly with Vera's. There was a flicker of recognition. A pause. And then the girl stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tentative but clear. "Sorry to bother you, but you're her, right?" Vera blinked, her heart stuttering for the briefest second. "I don't know what you mean," she replied gently, already reaching for her bag. But the girl smiled, not pushy, not invasive. Just odd. "You're the woman who stood up to the Navy," she said. "At the hearing. Her voice caught, you said the thing about not being silenced. My professor played it for our class." Vera looked down at her coffee, the heat long gone. She hadn't expected this. Not here. Not now. But somehow, she didn't feel fear. She felt something steadier. "I just told the truth," she said softly. "That's all." The girl shook her head. "That's not all. You changed everything." Then, without asking for a photo or a name, she simply said, "Thank you," and walked away. Vera sat in silence for a long time after that. Not because she was afraid of being seen, but because she finally understood that being seen was no longer the danger it once was. It was, in some quiet way, a measure of progress. Of what had been risked and what had been reclaimed. The truth wasn't just public now. It was alive. Across the bay, at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, a familiar voice echoed through a lecture hall. Admiral Robert Warren, now Professor Warren, stood at the front of the room, jacket off, sleeves rolled, chalk in hand. His class was filled with cadets who'd grown up hearing his name whispered in headlines and history books. To them, he was the man who walked away from stars and stripes for something more permanent, honor unflinching. "This," he said, tapping a section of case study on the screen behind him, "is where silence becomes complicity. And your job, the moment you put on the uniform, is to know when to speak." One cadet raised a hand. "Sir, is this about the Vera Anderson case?" Warren paused, then smiled faintly. "Everything is." He didn't speak of her often. Not out of guilt, not from shame, but from respect. That part of his life belonged to someone else now. To someone who had walked through fire, whispered for help, and changed the course of 2 nations by doing so. Back in the cafe, Vera reached into her coat and pulled out a worn envelope she kept tucked in the lining. Inside were 2 items, a photograph of her father, smiling beside a young Warren in dress whites, and the folded slip of paper with her original name. Vera Anderson. Not Eleanor. Not alias. Just her. She stared at it for a while, then slipped it back into her coat and stood to leave. She'd done what her father hadn't lived to finish. She'd told the truth and survived it. And as she stepped into the wind, letting it wash over her face, she realized something. She wasn't the same woman who had knelt before Robert Warren, bruised and breathless. She was the woman who spoke. She had whispered, "Please hide me," and what he did next wasn't just shocking, it was historic. And it changed everything. And thank you for watching until the end. There's another exciting story waiting for you on the left screen, don't miss it.